show. A couple of minutes late, technical issues. Apologies. I hope you're all very well, and you've had a good week, and everything's going well in the franchising world for you. I like to start off the show by explaining what it's all about. You may have been here before. In that case, apologies, but if you haven't, it's a show, as you can imagine, about franchising. But we take a topic each week and we delve deep into a topic and see how it applies not just in the franchising world, but also in the business world in general, in the kind of commercial sector for franchisors, for franchisees, and just have a little bit of a look at what a subject might mean. And we see whether we can get a little bit of advice together from a wonderful expert, and just have a bit of a deep delve into a subject and into a conversation. This is a LinkedIn Live. It goes to a few other platforms, but it's part of a body of work. We're going to be doing some YouTube shorts when I get around to doing those. We're going to be doing some how-to guides. We might even do an anthology at one point next year. So it's great to have people here. The chat is open. Your comments drive the show. We want it to be as relevant and interesting to people in the franchising world as possible. And therefore, anything that you want to ask us or anything you want to get into, just put a comment and we will put them up there. The topic this week is franchise culture. And we have a wonderful guest to talk about that. So I'd like to introduce you all to Danny Wareham. And he is a bit of an expert on culture, and hopefully we're going to see how we can apply that to the franchising world. He also has a lovely Christmas jumper on today as well, so that's all good. So anyway, over to you, Danny, to just do a little bit of an introduction as to what you do and how you've got into business culture.
Well, thank you, Harvey. And it's lovely to say that you wanted an expert on the show, but they weren't available. So you've got me.
Had to make do.
Yeah, it's a season of goodwill, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And thank you for noticing the Christmas top. I have a different one for every day in December. Everything to help me be festive. So a little bit. A little bit of a quick introduction for myself. I think many people may know me. I can see Kelly's in the chat already. So hi, Kelly.
Yes.
My name's Danny Wareham. I'm a business psychologist, and I specialize in creating the environments where the behaviors align with your organizational strategy. And in layman terms, that's things like employee engagement and culture, etc. But ultimately, I believe that happy bees make tasty honey. If we have the right people in the right environment, the right leadership, right direction, support, and culture, then your performance is a side effect of that. And that's basically what I do in a nutshell to help organizations.
Great. Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. And for people that don't know, that's why you have quite a lot of bee-based background stuff behind you, honeycombs, etc.
I do. It's a lovely metaphor for getting the message across. But it also becomes a bit of a lazy gifting idea as well. So I get, if anybody gets me anything, I'm surrounded by things that are covered in bees that are off camera as well. But there are worse things. There are worse gifts to have than jars of honey and notepads.
Very quickly, we just welcome a few people who've joined very early on. As you said, the wonderful Kelly is here. Kelly is a great friend of mine. I've been doing a LinkedIn Live with Kelly and with Don Cohen for many years. She's got not many years, many months. It feels like many years. But she's got her show directly after this one, The Awesome Journey, which is a really good show to watch. So looking forward to that, and you must tune in. We've got Mara here from Italy, which is fantastic. to have Mara here. Mara is going to be a returning guest in January, January 9th, I believe. And we have spoken about franchise mindset together, which blends quite well, I think, with today's topic of culture. You know, the two things I think sort of sit quite well together. So it'd be really, really interesting to get your thoughts today, Mara. We've got Simon here. Simon is a fantastic supporter of the show. Love Simon to bits. He's here more or less every week, always adds great value to the show, some fantastic comments, and it's always a pleasure to have Simon here. So looking forward to hearing what Simon has to say. And then finally, until we have a little bit more of a chat, we've got Penny here. And Penny Hopkinson is the author, and I'm going to plug her book again. She doesn't even pay me for this. But she wrote a book called Manual Magic, and she's going to be on the show, and we're going to have a great chat about that, and hopefully add some really good value to the franchise world with that. So I'm just seeing what's... That's good. Well, pay you in compliments, hopefully. We've got a couple of other people here. Just before we get, it's always good. I always like to recognise everybody is here, because we are a community, and it is all about us all getting things from the conversation as well. So Gary's here as well. I had a great chat with Gary recently. He's going to be a guest on the show towards the middle of next year. So really looking forward to getting his input put across the coming months, and seeing what he's got to say as well. And finally, for now, we've got Ajaya. I think is that how you pronounce that? Is
yes,
that
I know Ajaya.
Excellent.
So Ajaya is very active in the Institute of Leadership.
Perfect.
He's a great chap. So great to have you, Ajaya. Thank you.
Perfect. Great. Well, look, I thought I'd start, Danny, by asking you to explain what is the relevance with the bees, and how, and when you say that happy bees make tasty honey, how does that apply to creating a good culture in a business?
So it's a great question. That when I was deciding on my branding, bees became a natural metaphor for how do you get across what it is that you do, because a lot of people, when they think of things like culture, they think of something quite kind of abstract and ambiguous and a bit like fog. Similarly, when you think of bees, you tend to think of there is one bee in charge, the queen bee, and then everybody else works for them. I don't agree with that metaphor, and that's why it ties nicely with culture, is that a beehive doesn't have a leader. Everybody in the beehive has a very specific role they do that ensures the survival of the whole beehive. The queen's role is to produce offspring, but you have drones that look for food. You've got soldiers that evict all the men at the end of the season, but everybody works in a certain way to make sure the entire ecosystem is healthy. And culture is very similar. In the past, we've tended to look at things like engagement and culture in businesses as being leader-led. It all comes from the CEO and it permeates down. And that's not strictly true. Leaders do have a huge amount of influence over the smell of a place and how we get things done around here. But actually, culture it's co-created by everybody that's within that ecosystem, as well as the structures and the symbols and the rituals and things that we do as well. So the bee metaphor works really well for two reasons. One is it's a nice, short, punchy hook that people can remember you by, which is obviously very useful when you're in business. And the second is that the metaphor can become a discussion point, a jumping off point for more conversations about what culture actually is and why it's important. And it's not just beanbags and pizza Fridays and dogs under the desk and so on, any more than a beehive is only about honey.
No, that's great. And I think it's really important. And I think you made some really relevant points, because I think when people do think about culture, they do think about something that is a bit ambiguous, a bit, something that was put on a PowerPoint 6 years ago and has never really been touched on or talked about. Certainly not something that runs throughout an organization and makes a difference to how that organization grows and behaves. So I think it's such an important conversation and message to get across. But very quickly before we go, I have to have my phone here as well, because for some bizarre reason in the comments here, not everyone's comments come up. So we have some people who are a bit shy and like to hide away, but I like to recognize them as well. So on top of the wonderful people that we've already got here, or we'll recognize Don. So Don Cohen, you know Don, don't you, Danny? Need to check out Don's show. I've been a big part of that for many months with Kelly, Hour of Empower, every day at 11 o'clock Eastern time. So you can check that out anytime you want at that time. So that's great to have Don here. He's a fantastic supporter. I'm very pleased to have you here. We've got a couple of other people here, which is Mahmoud Morsi of a law firm. Great to have you here as well. Really interested. We're going to have a few topics on the legal side of franchising coming up next year. So it'd be great to have your thoughts on those and this episode as well. And finally, and there's Matt Smith as well. I think he's a friend of yours. There.
Oh, Matt Smith. He's another fantastic guy. You're just a honey trap for fantastic people today, I think.
Honey trap, you see, we're going back to the to the bees there. We got a couple of good comments that I think is worth putting up, and let's see what we're looking at here. So Simon's put, cultural fit is the most important factor when we are placing franchise professionals into new roles. Worth pointing out, Simon is a franchise recruitment expert. So if anybody needs that, go to Simon. But perhaps you could take that, because I think ignoring the franchise part of it, because I know that you're a specialist though in culture, and I think it's really true. You should hire on character and cultural fit, because skills can be trained and can be learned, but a cultural fit is much harder. What do you think about that point?
So there's probably 2 points here. The first is, I mean, the franchise model is effectively a commercial model. It's who pays the bills, who pays for the resource, and what permissions do you have to use it in certain contexts. But it's still a people business. So regardless of whether it's a franchise or a standalone organization, it's that they have the same kind of challenges and the same opportunities as well. Cultural fit is an interesting one because I view culture as a tool, not as it's an emergent property that hopefully aligns with your organization's strategy. And I talk in metaphor quite a lot, but if I were to say to you, imagine a workplace that's really exciting and really fun and vibrant and energetic, and every day is just laughs and banter and fun. And on a Friday, we can come in our sports clothes, and on a Wednesday, we've got a big inflatable wind machine and we can go in there and grab gift vouchers based on our performance. Isn't that the sort of place that you want to work? Well, congratulations, you're a terrible funeral directors. It's not about creating a place of fun. Hopefully it's fun as well. Work should be fun, but the behaviors you need in a funeral directors are different to the behaviors you need in a fintech. Cultural fit is one of those. Quite often culture has happened without a design behind it, so it's just happened by default. It's just, you don't have to be mad to work here, but it helps, and this is the resultant emergent culture that we have today. So if you're using cultural fit as a way of saying we only recruit people that fit into how we are today, then I do disagree with that, because it's only a gnat's whisker away from exclusionary practices. Because if you're only hiring people that fit in, then by default you're not hiring people that don't fit in, and that can be discriminatory. The question should be, how much change is in the organization? If there's not much, if it's, for example, if it's a legal firm, the law doesn't move very quick, processes and regulations don't move very quick. So cultural fit might be the right type of model, because it doesn't matter that you don't need innovation as much in those. But if you're an organization that thrives on innovation, like a Google, then actually culture add and culture adapt are far more useful as a strategic tool than just bringing in people that already think like us, already can hit the ground running, are already contributing to what could be groupthink, which is just where people go along, toe the line, don't rock the boat. So it's not that cultural fit is bad or that culture add is better. It's what do you want to achieve and what's the right tool for that job.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I like what you said about having an adaptable culture, I suppose is a good term. How do you think, still staying on this question really of when you're trying to find some employees for a section of your business that where you're looking to promote, or in fact any profession, any franchise or any employee in your business, how do you think character and culture intertwine? Do you think that somebody's character is what you look at when you're trying to see if there's going to be a good fit now and in the future?
It potentially, though again, the challenge is how do you measure or even identify character? The day-to-day kind of 90% of the time, hopefully, things just run smoothly in business, and how people behave when they're not under stress, not under attack, not under pressure can be very, very different to when the smelly stuff's hitting the whirly thing. So, and this is when those character traits kind of manifest, because we can show behaviors that are different to our core character or core personality traits that we can show in interviews and excuse me, work groups and so on. So my response would be more around what do you need to achieve with your business first of all. So where do you want to be in a year's time, 3 years time, 5 years time, whatever that arbitrary time is? What are the behaviors and approaches that are needed at that point? So in 5 years' time, what would it take for you to feel that you've hired the right person? What behaviors and approaches have you got? You can then work backwards from that to say, what am I missing today? And I've seen some fabulous, really different ways of doing that. I'll give you 2 quick examples. So there's a company that are similar to Grammarly called Automatic. They are a text-based service offering. They offer translation services and transcription services. They do all of their interviews via text message. There is no video. And most people that hear that, because we're still in this mindset of that's how we've always done things, that's a crazy way of doing interviews. What if they're not really the candidate? What if somebody else turns up? What if this? What if that? But the bottom line is their role when they're in the operation is to be able to communicate clearly via text message. That's the only communication they have. So being able to identify those individuals that bring those core skills and approaches, can be clear, can use bullet points in the right way, can have the right grammar. Actually, that's a far more powerful approach to interviews. And the second company is a recruitment company in the UK. And in recruitment, it's traditionally quite a male-dominated, laddish almost, work hard, party harder type approach. And what they've done is they're a female-led organization that got rid of all job descriptions. And instead, they went to each individual employee and said, when are you at your best? What do you love doing? What do you hate doing? And they created a bespoke job description, job role for that person based on when they're at their best. That then changed their entire talent attraction process, because they're able to say, we've got all of these things that need doing across our business, and these are the gaps. So now we can go out and recruit for the skills, the attributes, and the decision-making processes from certain people that love doing those sort of things, rather than we've got a Dave-shaped hole. What was Dave's job description? Let's just regurgitate that for the next hire. It also changes your idea of succession planning. So it's no longer junior recruiter to middle recruiter to area manager. It might be junior recruiter to database administrator, because you've got someone that really loves SQL and really loves the getting into the detail of what's in a database. So to come back to the point, the challenge is, how do you get rid of the kind of shackles of our old thinking and the things that we're naturally wired to do? We like people that are like us, you know, they get us, it's friendlier, it's more understanding, and instead use culture as a strategic tool to say, where do you want to go in the future? What are we missing, or what's helping and hindering us today? And then how do you find the people and identify the people that are going to help you on this journey?
I think that's brilliant, and I think that that's a fantastic way of looking at a business and looking at trying to fill those gaps, rather than that traditional way of, we need a person to do this role, let's employ someone to do this role, do the interview. You know, you might have somebody in one role who's, like you say, brilliant and passionate about doing something else.
Yep.
And if that's the case, their passion and enthusiasm to it is, you've got to take note of that, you know. And I think it's really a really good idea to really sort of look at things in perhaps a different way. A couple of bits here before we continue on. So Simon's put there, I think that's in response perhaps to the text message in interview kind of technique, but really interesting though. I completely agree with Simon. I think franchising is absolutely a people business, but it's interesting. You know, we have all of these tools at our disposal, right? And just because they're words doesn't make them necessarily less engaging. And I'm going to give a great example of this, right? Here we are having a conversation today, but actually the people that are writing some words here, just like, let's say, just like Simon's comment here that we started this conversation with, the words spark some real interest. So I agree with Simon, but I think it's good to have an open mind and to try and look at your culture and the way you grow and develop your business with more of an open mind, rather than sticking to these traditional things. Just want to recognize a couple of people and then go to a comment that Penny has put as well. So we have Leslie Flowers here. Leslie's a fantastic lady. Does several LinkedIn lives, including one on this subject, which most people probably would have heard of this book, but she does a whole LinkedIn live based on Think and Grow Rich. So well worth checking that out. And we've also got Randy here as well. Great to see Randy. Lovely chat. Known Randy for a while. And he's on holiday. Very nice. And he's choosing to spend a bit of that time with us. So I'm very honored, Randy. Thank you so much. So just want to quickly go back to something here that Penny has said and see what we think of this. So this needs to be explained in the ops manual so that the message is replicated faithfully across the network. Yeah, I think that that's really true. I had a really interesting conversation with somebody who does franchise training. Right? They were from the American Franchise Academy, and it was a really interesting conversation, because it was a sort of an identification that in franchising, there's, yes, you're buying into a brand. Yes, you're getting training on the product, on the service, on the delivery of that service. But there's a whole side on business acumen and developing, especially when you go to multi-site franchises. You really are growing your own business within the business then. And it's rarely put within the training and perhaps within those ops manuals. So yes, I completely agree, Penny. You know, an ops manual should be there to deliver a rounded training for someone to become a good franchisee. And that must include replicating the culture that is, because that's what makes the brand, or I think it is. I mean, do you think that, Danny? Do you think culture is a big part of a brand?
100%, yes. Though there are two parts to that kind of question. So, is culture part of your brand? Yes, culture is. It's the unwritten rules of how a group survives, how we get things done, the things that are not in the manual. It's the difference between, you can read a manual on how to drive, you can have lots of driving lessons that your driving lessons are identical to somebody else's because they've followed the same processes, but you really learn to drive afterwards, after you've passed your test and start to see what real interactions are like. I've said before, in the UK, there is nothing in the highway code, there is nothing in your driving instructor manuals that says you should flash your lights to let somebody pull out. Yeah, everybody does that because that's just how we do things around here. Culture is how we really drive. And to take it a step further, you can have exactly the same manual, or exactly the same role, exactly the same remuneration, everything identical between two banks, but how it feels to work there can be totally different. So objectively, the ops manuals kind of say this is the sort of bare service minimum. You know, you have to have 2 gherkins on your burger on your Big Mac, for example, regardless of whether the franchise is in Albuquerque or Abu Dhabi. So there are some that
we're going to open up the whole gherkin debate now. People like gherkins and don't.
but it sets this is the expectation, the explicit expectation of how we get things done around here. But actually, culture's much more powerful and can be a differentiator. I used to work rather for a telecoms company that had about 500 shops, retail outlets, and they decided to go to a franchise model, and they started the process by looking at which stores were least commercially viable to keep in house. So they went after the lower turnover stores first. And when they went to a franchise model, within a few months, many of those stores were outperforming some that were in higher tiers in terms of their turnover. Even though it's the same people, because they two-peed them across, same people in the same shops, it's the same branding, it's the same phones, it's the same service, it's the same tariffs, everything is the same. And it was because one of the things that culture can do is it can create engagement through many things, but 2 main ones for employees to feel that they make a difference. The first is autonomy. So I know what the objective is in my particular franchise outlet or my particular team or my particular organization, and I am trusted that I can contribute to that in the best way I know how, not just pull this lever, hit this KPI. And the second is I feel seen. I feel that people recognize when I'm not here and they recognize my benefits. So my work is purposeful. And that balance between does the work I do matter, and am I trusted to contribute my best without being micromanaged or sticking to processes. And in a franchise model, that's exactly what happened. It wasn't Sarah has taken over the store and now we work for Sarah. They still felt they worked for the big telecoms company. But today, how I talk to that customer, I don't have to follow the script word for word. I can bring some humanity and some personality into the conversation. And because of that, their performance skyrocketed. And that's what culture does. Culture is lubricant.
That's really interesting. And you can name drop them as well. It's not the BBC. So. Just want to recognise another couple of people who are here. We've got Johnny Joseph here. Johnny is a great guy. He does franchise audits. He's going to be a guest on the show. And he appears to be in Las Vegas. Okay. I'm not sure quite.
That's why his typing's a bit. He's been on the cards for the last 18 hours.
That's it. He doesn't know what time it is. He's on his 15th drink. No, I jest, of course, but yeah, great to have Johnny here. A fantastic guy. Really looking forward to talking to him about franchise audits, because that's quite a sort of scary thing, and it's going to be a great conversation to have. So really looking forward to that. I'm just going to bring up a comment here that that Simon's made. The culture of a franchise network can change very quickly. For example, when the founder franchisor exits the business to a private equity company, the impact of this change can be very significant. How do you manage this transition without alienating franchisees? I'm going to quickly take this, and I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on some of the cultural aspects of this. But I was having listening to a conversation with a friend of mine, Joe Caruso, who does a similar thing to this in the States on a Friday called Franchise Chat. And one of the subjects they had was exactly that, or what happens if the franchisor sells the business? What happens if the franchisee, especially if they're multi-site, wants to sell the business? And they called it a continuity plan. And I really liked the idea of this, especially for bigger businesses and when you've got several sites. And this was really a plan that's put in place that allows that impact that you're talking about there, Simon, to be less, because you've got a team that kind of comes in and takes up the slack of what's going to happen in that period. But I think it's really important to make sure that the cultural aspects of that, how people are feeling during that. Danny, you spoke about what the objective is, and people need to be heard, and have what they say listened to. And I think that's really important, especially when there's big changes happening in an organization, because generally speaking, people are nervous. They're worried for their job. They're worried how things will change. What's your thoughts on that as a comment?
So again, there's two parts. So the first is that the example is probably right, that a continuity plan is needed, and from a psychology point of view, that's to kind of set the expectations of what's going to happen, so that the individual can then have some awareness of how they might respond to it. The challenge with selling up, or a new leader coming in, or some change that was out of the blue, is our body's going to fight, fright, or fleas. Flight or freeze, because we perceive it as a threat. And when that happens, our decision making completely changes. Our character is kind of shown as well. And if you're feeling unsafe, if you don't know if your role is secure, if you don't know is your social group going to be broken up and I won't have the belonging that I have, I won't be part of the tribe, etc. If that's going to change, then it doesn't matter that you've got all these fantastic perks and things that are higher up the kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The bottom line is safety and security comes first, and a continuity plan can help mitigate some of that to a degree. The second part is that I said at the start that some people think of culture as being this kind of ambiguous, abstract idea. There is a little bit of truth in that it is fluid and dynamic, and there's never a fixed culture. If a new person joins or leaves the group, if processes and symbols or rituals change around the group, you'll get changes in the culture, in the smell of the place. Changing leader is a big ripple. It's a big effect of that. Even the threat of changing leader, and I'm sure many people in the chat will have gone through that as well, that they thought there was a merger going ahead and then it didn't happen, or we've heard sales is going to merge with marketing, and nothing actually objectively happens, but it still creates this tribal, I don't know what, I should be wary of that next tribe in the next valley kind of thing. They're a bit weird over there. That's what happens to us internally. So the ways that you can mitigate it is be open and be transparent around these are the expected steps on that journey, and recognize that it's okay for an organization, particularly a multi-site organization or even a big organization, to have subcultures, because that's what does happen. So instead of fighting against it and trying to create a homogeny of everybody should think and decide things the same and make it a cult rather than a culture, yeah, the better thing to do is to kind of learn to ride the waves of all these changes, and hopefully the leadership team particularly are aware enough to kind of nurture and nudge the culture in the right direction, even though this kind of wibbly wobbly ball of how we get things done around here is wibbly wobblying. Hopefully that makes sense. It's still heading in the right direction.
And actually, I'm going to put up Mara's comment, because you said about how things are done around here.
Yeah.
And I'm putting up this comment here. It's that how things are done is not what we believe in. And I think I know what Mara's getting to, because this is perhaps when you talk to an organization and they say this is how we've always done it. And there's a resilience to change, perhaps. So I thought I'd bring up that. And I think it's very important, culturally speaking, for, like you said, it to be adaptable, for it to be a fluid thing, something that can change. I picked up on a couple of things that you said that I just think are really imperative to talk about, and I think really encapsulate culture. One thing you said is how it feels, right? So I think how you make someone feel with your culture and with your organization is really key. I think if you can keep that in your mind, that your decisions could make people feel not at ease, or like you said, if there's a changing leader, what needs to happen is a definite time scale. It needs to be communicated properly, and people need to feel secure in that things may change for the positive, but I think it needs to be communicated well, and make sure people's feelings are taken into account. I think feelings and culture run hand in hand. I was just going to put up here something that Jay has said. The franchise organization should use its culture and values to differentiate itself from its competitors. Isn't that so? Yeah. What do you think about a business using culture to as a USP and as a selling point of the business? Do you think it can be easily translated into something like that, or do you think it's a little bit more in the background? It's a harder one to bring to the surface sometimes.
It's a fabulous question. I'd expect nothing less from Ajaya. There are you can't tell people what your culture is. Your people will show us. So can you use it as a USP? You already are, because you'll know from when a new starter starts in the business, even if they're the most garrulous, extroverted person, you'll notice that you tend to be a little quieter for the first couple of days until subliminally you pick up the social cues of how do we get things done around here, and then they'll come out of the shell. So we naturally assimilate into the cultures that we go into. So it's already a selling point, for better or worse. What's more difficult is using it as an explicit selling point, as if it was a pricing point or a service or a feature and benefit, because it's not easy to define in that way, to say this is what it's like. And part of that is because it's subjective, so everybody will interpret it slightly different. And this is why I argue that there are no good or bad cultures, there are no toxic cultures. Culture is a tool that helps you deliver your organizational strategy. So either it helps you or it doesn't. So either it matches or it mismatches. In terms of toxicity, you talked about culture being part of your brand earlier. What a company says it's about, and what it's really about, the bigger the delta between those two things, the more likely things are going to be harder to get across the line in your business, more expensive to get across the line. But on an individual level, I signed up for the dream. I signed up for all these things that the organization said they were about. And when I've got into the business, you're potentially asking me to behave in a way that's incongruent with my values, and therefore it's toxic. And a quick example of that might be Twitter. Elon Musk has been very, very clear that if you want to work here, you're sleeping in the office, you're doing 16, 17-hour days. There's going to be a culture of command and control, even a culture of fear. I personally wouldn't want to work there. But there are people that thrive in that environment. So it's not a toxic culture, because something that's toxic would be toxic to everybody all of the time. But how many organizations claim that they're more like a Richard Branson, but in the reality is they're an Elon Musk? And it's, do we walk our talk? And so to come back to the point, can you use it as a USP? You already are, whether you realize it or not. People feel culture. They know if something's right or not. And there may be some explicit things, company values that say, we're an open door policy and we thrive on honesty and integrity, and then they don't have the salary and the job descriptions. There are little bits of evidence that aren't what they say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was really interesting. You can say, you were saying there about what a company's about and what they say it's about, and the differences between the two. And I think that's a really valid point for people to remember. If they're thinking of turning their business into a franchise business, if they are thinking of going into franchising, or if they're a franchisor, or if you've just got a business and you're looking at your culture. I think my thoughts on this, and it is a great question. I think my thoughts on this is, if you get your culture right, then it starts to translate into things that are easier to differentiate. I can't say that word. to make you different to your competitors. So for instance, if you've got a really good culture with your franchisees are happy, they trust you, you've got an open relationship with them, you're telling them what's going on, right? Then what you're going to have is, you're going to have franchisees that are advocates for your business, and you're going to have franchisees that have been with you for a long time. Now, those two things can be as a result of a good culture, and then can differentiate, I've said it this time, you from your competitors. So I think that my view is, if you get your culture right, you work on it, and you have happy bees, doing your thing there. If you have happy bees, then you will start to find that the things that you're looking at, so if someone's looking at your financials from one franchise to another, if you've got happy people and you're really understanding your people, then the numbers are going to look better, because people are going to want to do it, and they're going to want to get through if they've got a challenge as well. So I think culture, it can give resilience to a brand, and then it can translate into these USPs. I wanted to touch on what you said about toxic culture in a moment, because I think it's a word that's sort of thrown about a bit, and I think it's worth discussing. But quickly, before we do that, there was a few I just wanted to recognize a couple of other people. Penny's got to go. Great to have seen you, Penny. Thanks for being here. Thanks for all of your comments and supporting again. And Johnny's got to get back to the blackjack table. Well, good luck, Johnny. I hope you win and get 21. But it's great to have you here. I'm going to quickly pull up a comment from Simon. We'll have a chat about that, and then perhaps go back to toxic culture. So what's Simon's here? Okay. What's the difference between culture and values? I'm going to let you have a stab at this one, because I can then think about it for a bit.
So I have a slightly different school of thought on this. So culture and values is kind of a McKinsey-esque idea that came along in the 80s, that organizations need to put on the wall what it is that they stand for, and that becomes a kind of guiding star for all of their employees. And this is where all those inspirational words of integrity and responsibility and customer at the heart of everything we do, and those kind of phrases come to mind. I don't hold that same view, is a short answer. I believe people have values and organizations have culture.
Okay.
And the reason is that values to me are contextual. People, when they're put on the wall in an organization, they're almost, those are perfect values for this organization. Now, let's say that you have a value of honesty. I'm always tell the truth. I've got high integrity. I'm honest. Me and my partner both put on a lot of weight through COVID, through lockdowns. So if she asks me, how do I look today? If my value is honesty and integrity, it could be very hurtful, the things that I say. But I'm true to my values, and that's the important thing. On the flip side, I have personal value about being dependable. If anybody needs me, I'll always be there. You pull yourself up by your bootstraps and get everything done. But the trade-off is when I need help, I find it really hard to ask for help because my value is it's dependable. So values are not good or bad either. They're context dependent. They're important to you as an individual, but in companies, you see them weaponized. You see we've got a value of speed. Well, it took me 2 days to get my password reset. I thought we operated with speed, and they become a stick to beat you with rather than something that actually drives your organization's behaviors, etc. as well. So my personal view is values are individual. Culture is what organizations have, or any social group has.
I think that's really interesting. Do you think then, if that's the case, do you think then that the values of, let's say, an entrepreneur has some values that they consider to be important? Do you think in the throes of creating a scalable business, because when we talk about franchising, we're talking about one way to scale a business. But when you're looking at creating a scalable business, you're looking at trying to encapsulate what you have created. And a lot of that may come perhaps from your own values. So do you think then in that case that if values are people and culture as an organization, do you think that one leads onto the other? Does a entrepreneur's values lead onto the culture of an organization?
Potentially, because we tend to build things in our own image. The challenges are those values sustainable long term. Because many entrepreneurs can have personality traits that are highly narcissistic. The rules don't apply to me. I'll take risks. I'm special, and that's really that personality traits, just like values, are contextual as well. Sometimes it's good to be extroverted. Sometimes it's not so good. Narcissism is another one of those. Sometimes it's really good to not have the rules. To not pay attention to the rules, but other times that's not a good thing. So when you're setting a business up, when an entrepreneur is setting a business up and going against the flow and being disruptive, then those values that are disruptive, going against the flow, we're special, might be good. But once you're an established brand, they might actually hinder you. So my view is far more important is, why do we exist? What's that North Star of what are we here to achieve? What difference do we make in the world? The behaviors then fall out of that naturally, because if you have a view of, my mission is, I believe that everybody should be able to contribute purposefully without fear of ridicule or reprimand. That's my vision. So in that model, I know, should I do X or Y? So if somebody says to me, will you come on this podcast? I can go, well, does that align with what I'm trying to achieve, which is to make the world where everybody can contribute purposely without fear of ridicule or reprimand? Well, Harvey's a stand-up guy. I know you well. I know that what you want to achieve isn't the same, but it aligns with that. So therefore we can do things together. That doesn't mean that somebody else will go, will you come on this podcast, or will you endorse this product or whatever? That might be a fantastic product, but if it doesn't align with what I believe, then you're asking me to behave in a way that's incongruent with my values and my organization's values, and therefore it should be steered clear from. The challenge is a lot of organizations don't have that North Star, or in the case of franchisees, somebody else has provided that North Star for you. So what is Starbucks North Star? What is McDonald's North Star, etc.? So the challenge is, did you buy into the franchise because you believe in that mission and you believe in that vision? Or have you bought into it because, it was only a couple of £1,000 and I might be able to turn over a quick book, in which case you get ethical fading and I'll do anything to achieve that quick book. So what's your motives? Are they aligned to why we're here in the first place?
Oh, I think that's really interesting. I think that point there is a really interesting one, because when we look at franchisees and we look at a fit for a franchisor or for a business, a big part of it, there's some easy questions about finance and experience maybe, but then there's some really intricate questions that rely on experience at the moment to a large extent, as to you're trying to ascertain what the character of that person is really like. Are they a good fit? I've had job interviews in the past where I had to fill out a personality test, and it was a big page, maybe 100 words.
Yeah.
100 words on it, and I had to just tick the words that applied to me. And then the next stage of it was, if you were getting this job, which words would apply to the job.
Yeah.
I wonder if these two words are connected, if values are people and culture is organization. Is there at the moment, my view is we have a conversation and we see if there's a fit. Perhaps there's something, a process that can be put in place to try and put that into a way where we can at least run it through a process to give us a good idea as to if someone is going to have the values to match our culture. Very quickly, because we are
I think we're just running out of time, aren't we?
Starting to head towards the end. I just want to follow up and just have a look at a few comments here to make sure that we've covered everything. Gary said that he's got to go. Well, great to have you here, Gary. Thanks for being here. Leslie has said sorry. She called you Simon.
I've been called worse.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. It's how you express your values.
Yeah.
Can it be done?
Your values, like your culture, are expressed through your behavior.
Yeah.
That's it. You don't need to get into all the kind of psychometrics and the questions and answers that you've done, or all these kind of tools that are available. The bottom line is, what are your actions and your behaviors? And if they're incongruent with what you say, then you've got a problem. If you go on a date with somebody and they tell you they've got a yacht and they're multi-millionaire and so on, and then they don't pay for the meal, or you go on a second date and it's at the Red Lobster for our American people, the more of these pieces of information that go, hang on, there's something wrong here. I don't know what it is, but there's more little pieces of evidence.
And I suppose that's why I always talk about a trust journey when you're looking at a franchise or franchisee relationship.
Yeah.
And that journey needs to be, people look at trying to shorten it, trying to get someone from the point of interested to the point of being a franchisee. But it has to be a period of time, because through that process of getting to know somebody, you start to understand and learn through, like you said there, through their actions, who they are and what type of franchisee they might be. Very quickly, we've just got a few others before we sort of round up here. We've got Natalia. Natalia's going to be a guest here. Love today's discussion. Fantastic points and so much food for thought. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mara's put, loved it. Appreciate that. And Leslie has put fish and chips in newspaper. Wow, that's made
cordon bleu. That is nothing wrong with fish and chips in newspaper.
In fact,
that's the British Red Lobster.
Yeah. Well, there you go. You see, exactly.
Just to round out on your points, Harvey, that you can't shorten it. The bottom line is it's about trust, and there's lots of definitions of trust. My personal favorite is it's the biological response that you have when somebody else has your well-being at heart. When you know that somebody else has got your back, when somebody else is going to cover for you when the chips are down, that's where trust is kind of built. You can't do that overnight, and it's displayed by your actions and behaviors. And when it comes to a franchisee-franchisor model, you can either treat it as a tribal relationship of, this is my little fiefdom and that's yours, and I have to use your branding and your leaflets and whatever, or you can have it as a mutually reinforcing, trusting relationship where you know that the franchisor has got your back, has all of the experience, the tools, etc., and the network and resources at their disposal to make your life a little bit easier if you'll just let them.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's been a really, really good conversation for me today. I always get such great value from these conversations, and I hope other people do as well. Before we round up, I just wanted to give you a little bit of an opportunity to talk about what it is you do for companies and what is the best way to get in touch with you if somebody wants to help with their culture within their organization.
So I talked about our talk and our walk. In very quick terms, I help companies identify how do you get that closer. So I work with them to understand what's the environment they need for the future and what's the behaviors and approaches and cognition, etc., for the future. Then have a look at what's going on today and what's helping and hindering and kind of diagnose what's under the hood, and then identify where best to invest, where you're going to get the most juice from the squeeze, rather than just pelting the problem with lots of fun stuff or however our approach is today. And in terms of how you can get hold of me, I'm quite active on LinkedIn. You can also get me at firgun.co.uk. So Firgun is my consultancy. It's a Hebrew word that encapsulates my core driver, which is it's the sincere delight and pleasure in somebody else's accomplishments.
Oh, that's lovely. That's
So
a nice
Firgun. Yeah, we need more of it in the world.
Perhaps here you can put a little link to that, or I will. I'll put a link to that on the comments when I go back, and I'm going to go back and look at the comments, and always like to try and respond to everybody as well, because it adds to the value for me of this as well. Yeah. So that is it for today. First of all, Danny, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a lovely chat. I always love chatting to you, and I think that we've done the topic proud, so I'm very pleased to have had the conversation with you. And I wanted to thank everybody who's taken their time to be here today. Again, it's a community, and the comments that come in are what drives the show, and that's what adds value to the show for me and hopefully for everyone else. So we won't be back next Tuesday, because next Tuesday is Boxing Day, so I'm just going to be eating mince pies and things like that Boxing Day. But we will be back the Tuesday following that, which is the 2nd of January, and we will be on with the wonderful Michael Hyam. Michael runs the franchise exhibitions across North America and Canada, and is a real franchising expert. It's going to be an absolute pleasure to talk to him and to get into the subject of franchise exhibitions and franchise leads. So I hope everyone can join us for that one. And until then, Merry Christmas and goodbye and Happy New Year to you all. Take care.